here. Today is tax day. I've already had my yearly ordeal, and I'm sure you have too, or you're going through it right now. One of the few lines of defense that we have from these armed tax collectors is the National Taxpayers Union. And Andrew Lautz is with the National Taxpayers Union. He's the Director of Federal Policy at NTU. And Andrew, is it right to even say Happy Tax Day? Do we even say that?
Well, thanks for having me on, Tom. It's not a happy, so we won't say Happy Tax Day, but we will say, it's here, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so has the IRS, has their legions of new tax collectors, have they begun working it? Are they yet employed? Have they been dispatched to go hunt us down? Go hunt us down?
Well, no. The short answer is no. The IRS, when it received this $80 billion from Congress last year in the Inflation Reduction Act, about half of that, a little more than half of that actually, is earmarked for increasing. And you'll see the IRS start to hire up in their enforcement division over the coming years. Where they've been trying to spend more money in these early months is on customer service. And that to us is a good thing because we want more people answering the phones when taxpayers have questions. But nope, the enforcement funding really hasn't started to kick in yet. That'll be in the years ahead.
So what I've seen and what I've heard from folks and what I have experienced is that the people who usually get hurt from the IRS enforcement is the little guy, because the little guy, for one, they are a huge institution, and we're just citizens here. And if they claim that you screwed up on line 57D subset 9 from 6 years ago, and they send you a bill, then it's just kind of easier to pay it for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern. What public officials, what politicians have been saying about the new funding for the IRS is that it's going to be used to go after, the wealthy, to go after big corporations. And that may be the intent of the Biden administration. But unfortunately, as you point out, if the IRS hit certain revenue targets, it is much easier and much quicker for them to go after, the proverbial low-hanging fruit, and that is often, low and middle income taxpayers, some of whom have made honest mistakes or haven't made mistakes at all in their tax filing, and those small businesses, those lower middle income taxpayers don't have an army of accountants and lawyers, at their disposal to sort of go toe to toe with the IRS. And let me throw one more, sort of number at you. Just the instruction book for the Form 1040 this year. This is what, the individual income tax return, the overwhelming majority of taxpayers are filing with the IRS. Yep. Just the instruction book for that is 263 pages, 257 this year. In 2000, it was 117 pages. Back in 1965, it was only 17 pages. So our tax code is getting enormously more complicated, and we can't solely blame the IRS for that. The IRS could be doing a lot better, but really where the blame falls here is Congress over the last 50 years has made the tax code infinitely more complicated.
And, one of the reasons I assume for that is because special interests are going in and asking for carve-outs or is that the influence here that we're talking about?
It's certainly a factor. I mean, there are so many credits and deductions and exemptions in the code now, and it's enough to make your head spin. I mean, the tax code is literally thousands and thousands of pages now. And my colleague, Damian Brady at NTU Foundation, every year around Tax Day, we release at NTU Foundation an annual tax complexity study. And we released that study yesterday. And what my colleague Damian found is that last year, 2022, taxpayers spent 6.55 million hours complying with federal tax law and filing their taxes. That total tax compliance burden, when you account for the out-of-pocket costs for things like accountants and software, and when you account for the opportunity costs of the time spent on filing your taxes, it totals up to $364 billion.
Oof. We are talking to Andrew Lautz. He is Director of Federal Policy. Is the dream of ever having a tax code that's on a postcard, is that something that would ever be a reality? Could ever be a reality?
Well, Tom, we're a long way from that reality, but I can tell you, one thing that helped in the 2017 tax reform law that Congress passed and that the president at the time, Donald Trump, signed into law. It doubled the standard deduction that the overwhelming majority of taxpayers who are filing federal taxes, about 90% now, take the standard deduction rather than itemizing their deductions. And by doubling the standard deduction, it significantly reduced the tax filing burdens that a lot of taxpayers face, because instead of folks having to tally their mortgage interest deduction and their state and local tax deduction and all these other deductions available on the code, for a lot of people it was more they were reducing their tax burdens more by just taking the standard deduction because it was much larger than it used to be, and that helps. So that has helped us make progress in simplifying tax burdens, but we are still a long way from filing your taxes on a postcard.
So why do we need these tens of thousands, almost 100,000 more agents? Is it does the federal government see something on the horizon that the normal everyday people wouldn't?
Well, so the goal of the legislation and what the Biden administration and what Democrats in Congress want to do with the increased money for tax enforcement activities, the increased IRS employees in the enforcement division, they want to essentially go after what's called the tax gap, and that's the gap between taxes that are actually paid to the IRS every year and taxes that the IRS believes the country owe in the aggregate. And this is, it is a problem that, according to the IRS and according to the Treasury Department, hundreds of billions of dollars of taxes that are owed every year are not paid. And there are ways that we can sort of, get at reducing that gap without actually having to increase taxes on the people who are, honestly paying their tax bills. But the concern here is that the IRS doesn't have a great history with enforcement and with respecting taxpayer rights and due process. So that's something that we're very on guard about. And the other issue, as you and I discussed a couple minutes ago, is that the IRS could go first and foremost after the so-called low-hanging fruit, people who don't have the accountants and lawyers to go toe-to-toe with the IRS.
Well, yeah, and I'm looking at NTU.org, which is the National Taxpayers Union website. There's a report about Social Security Trust Fund being depleted in essentially a decade. And there's part of me, maybe it's my dystopian paranoia, but part of me sees lawmakers going to the IRS and saying, "Get to work, boys, fill the gap." Well,
there are as Security is, as most of your listeners know, Social Security is funded by payroll taxes, and there is a gap in payroll taxes owed versus payroll taxes paid. What our concern was that lawmakers, when they passed this funding last year, a lot of them were saying that this additional revenue that the IRS could collect from increasing enforcement activities would fund a lot of the spending priorities that Democrats in Congress had at the time. And so that was that was our concern, is that rather than actually trying to reduce the debt or the deficit or actually try to fix Social Security, which is hurtling towards insolvency, that the focus on these additional enforcement revenues was going to be just to pay for new spending. That was a concern of ours.
Wow. Are Americans? Let me put it this way, Andrew. Is it a big problem? And this is my theory, that this is the big problem, that every year people celebrate their tax refund. Does that not tell you that there is just a vast misunderstanding of what's going on?
I would encourage people to think of, if they're getting a refund, that's actually money that the government has been holding in an interest-free loan for several months. Right. So, So yes, refunds are actually down this year on average. The average refund last year was about $3,200. This year it's down about 10% to $2,900, and some people are kind of griping about that. And I would say to people, think of this as you gave less of your income to the government over the course of a year that they held in an interest-free loan. So.
Yeah, right. It's a great point. We would never. This idea that you're celebrating, the government gave me a check. No, the government overcharged you. like you said, it did not gain interest, like you said. And unfortunately, Andrew, this is probably at the National Taxpayers Union. I think that the one of your challenges must be just educating people, because people just don't seem to know how the economics of the tax of the system that we have works.
Yeah, and honestly, again, that's not the fault of sort of everyday taxpayers outside of the Beltway and outside of Washington D.C. I go back to Congress has made this enormously complicated over the last 100 years, but it's gotten sort of progressively more and more and more complicated, especially in the last 30 to 40 years. And it's impossible for folks like us at NTU who work on tax policy every day to keep up with all the changes in the code, much less, sort of your average taxpayer who is just trying to, make sure he pays his taxes on time or gets his refund on time. And so, Congress has a lot of work to do to actually simplify the tax code, and we're working towards that at NTU as well.
Do you actively go and try to, lobby, cajole, convince Congress that the current income tax system is unhealthy?
Yes, and we're on Capitol Hill every day, trying to talk with staff for members of Congress and members of Congress themselves and encourage them to act. But it is. I think all of your listeners know it is hard to get Congress to do anything, much less tackle the enormously complex tax code. And so it's an ongoing battle for us, and we take small victories where we can get them. But until we get some more comprehensive overhaul, we're going to be on Capitol Hill every day trying to lobby Congress to improve and simplify the code.
Thanks. I'm glad you are. His name is Andrew Lautz. Andrew, I get this every year at this time. By the way, you can follow him on Twitter at Andrew_Lautz, Lautz. Every year, and forgive me for asking this, I get a whole bunch of emails in my inbox saying, guess what, Tom? You don't seem to understand. The income tax is actually voluntary, the federal income tax. And I never take anybody's advice and stiff the government. But settle this: is the federal income tax voluntary?
It is not. We've seen some of these claims out there. To the best of our knowledge and all the research we've done, those claims are not true. The income tax is not voluntary.
Dang, that was our chance. Imagine what a piece of well-hidden good news that would have been. Well, Andrew Lautz, we really appreciate it. Guys, go to ntu.org. There's a fantastic resource. There's a page that makes me actually fairly nauseous that shows how many what our lawmakers get paid. They're doing such a wonderful job for us. Oh, that's over and above all their stock portfolios, which just seem to do really well. I don't know how they manage to make that happen, but I don't have such good luck. Andrew Lautz, thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you, Tom.